Hey, what's up, guys? This is Keith here. I'm the founder of Grow Your Faith. And in this video, I'm going to explain who I am, what this ministry is, and why it exists. And I am currently in the church. I set up my desk right here in the corner, and over there is all the chairs and everything. So, who am I? Right. My name is Keith Philip West. I'm from Dallas, Texas. I served 6 years in the United States Marine Corps. Where is it? I don't have it. My Eagle Globe and Anchor, the one I got with me, is going to be somewhere on my desk. But I gave my life to God when I was 16. But before I became 16 and gave my life to God, before I became a Christian, I was you got it, a church goer. I grew up in the church. I went to church in pre-K, kindergarten, all my life. I went to church. Here's the kickstart. Here's the kickstart, right? I got me a kickstart. But here's the kicker. Between the ages of 8 until I was 12, I was in the back of a police car multiple times. I set a park on fire. I set a house on fire. I robbed a house one time. I helped a group of people go into a home that the people were moving into the home, and we just took everything. We took everything. I was 10 years old when I did that, maybe 8. I used to go into people's cars and take all their money, and I did that for like 6 months or a year or something. Finally, it caught up to me, and the guy that owned the truck came out, saw me in his car, and went running after me. I was in third grade when that happened. Called the cops. Cops came, threw me in the back of a police car. When I was 11 years old, do I have the documents? I have the documents somewhere, but when I was 11 years old, I stood before a judge. I plead guilty to a second degree felony in arson. I set some grass on fire. There was a shed. And I stood before a judge and said, I'm guilty. I did it. I don't want to hold up the court system too long. So they dropped the felony charge to a misdemeanor, class B misdemeanor. And I had 24 hours of community service. I was 11 years old. I watched my brother spend half his life behind bars. And to this day, that same brother is somewhere homeless. Nobody really knows. He started doing drugs, ruined his life. The dude was smart, man. The dude was making straight A's in school. He completely ruined his life because it started with weed, then heroin and cocaine, and he was a car thief, and he would steal cars at nighttime, and he went the wrong way. When I was 12 years old, I opened the Bible for the first time. I open the Bible and I read Genesis 1:1. It says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And I'm reading the Bible and I'm thinking to myself, wow, it tells you how the world started. So I just kept on reading and I was mind blown. I didn't know the Bible told you about the beginning of the world. Being Keith West, I don't like reading books, right? Who likes reading books? I don't like reading books. So I'm looking at the Bible, I'm looking at Genesis 1:1, and I thought, I wonder how the story ends. And so I turned to the very last chapter of the book and I read about the come second coming of Jesus Christ. And I was like, I have never heard about this before. And it interests me so much that I began to read the Bible when I was 12. Then when I was 14 years old, I decided there is no God. If there is a God, that he wants nothing to do with me, and because I'm just one person, there's been billions, maybe trillions of people to ever walk the earth. What does he want to do with me for? And so I stopped believing in a God. I became an atheist, 14 years old. But the Bible interests me so much, I wanted to finish reading through it. So I kept on reading through the Bible. I stopped going to church, and I just considered the Bible was just a nice little book. When I was 16 years old, I woke up one Sunday and I heard a voice say, "Get up and go to church." I got up, I looked around the house, and there was no one. No one. I didn't see anyone. Not my family. Nobody was in the house. It was just me. And I thought to myself, man, I'm just tired or something. Or I was dreaming. So I went back to my room, lay down, and I hear this voice again say, "Get up and go to church." I got up and I walked 3 miles to the church that I was going to before I stopped going to church. During those couple of months, as I continued to go to church, the pastor was preaching a sermon series on giving your all to God. And so one day when I was washing dishes in my mom's house, at the kitchen sink, I'm washing the dishes. I'm thinking about everything the pastor's been saying the last couple of months. And I thought to myself, could it be true? Could there be a God? What if I got on my knees and said the sinner's prayer? Could it be that easy? And then I started telling myself, well, I'm a good person. I'm sure I can stand and weigh out all my good and my bad deeds before God one day. But I was thinking, well, if God is holy, then how can I ever stand before God? Even if I steal a little cookie from a cookie jar that belongs to my mom, I'm a thief. I'm a sinner. So how can I, as a sinner, stand before a holy and righteous God? How can I possibly weigh out my good and my bad deeds on that day when I stand before God? And I thought to myself, either it's true, Jesus Christ died on the cross for our sins and paid the debt, or there is no hope for humanity to come before the presence of a holy and righteous God. So I go to my room that night and I pray and I say, God, I do not know if you are real, but if you are, I give you my life. I give you 100% of my life. I will go wherever you tell me to go. I will do whatever you tell me to do. I will say whatever you tell me to say. And then God spoke to me and said, go preach this gospel, table to table, during in the cafeteria, during lunch at school. So the next day, I'm in the cafeteria. I'm in the lunch line. And I'm looking at the cafeteria, and I'm thinking, I'm gonna go table to table. What do I say? What do I say? I don't know much about the Bible. I don't know what I'm gonna say. That Jesus died on the cross, and I'm just gonna tell them whatever I heard at church. And so that's what I did. I just told them what I heard the pastor say on Sunday. I went table to table and I told them what the pastor said on Sunday. In 4 weeks, 50 people, 50 students in that lunchroom came to Christ. They accepted Jesus Christ into their heart. By the end of that year, everyone in the school was calling me a preacher. That was my nickname, preacher. And then I got pulled into the office, and all the principals of all the different grade levels and my teachers, they were all in this room, and they're like, Keith, you need to stop preaching about Jesus in the classrooms and in the hallways. Leave that stuff at home. And I told them, I am who I am. You cannot stop me from doing what God has told me to do. I am going to preach the gospel to everyone. And you're not going to stop me. I'm going to keep on going. And they just looked at me with their big old eyes. They didn't know what to say. At the end of the year, the principal of my grade level gave me this reward of integrity in front of all the student body, 300 students, and I was selected out of all of them. Reward for integrity. The individual that was being picked up by the cops outside the school, getting in trouble in school, getting sent to the office, God took that individual and radically changed his life. I was getting in trouble at school, getting sent to the office. I was, you name it. I was like getting picked up by the cops outside of school. I definitely did not come out of the kind of family, the perfect Christian family. My dad was no pastor. My dad was a drunk. My stepdad spent time in federal penitentiary. My mom, she was just a single mother trying to pay the bills, and my brothers were doing crazy stuff, and I was doing crazy stuff. And God stepped down and said, I'm going to use you. There was nothing I did. All I did was, God, here I am. Send me. I'll go. That was the beginning of my ministry. 50 people came to Christ. Everyone's calling me a preacher. I started going door to door. I had a mission. The mission was to go to every single door, every single house in the city of Carrollton, Texas. The ministry quickly became an online ministry. I met this girl. Her name was Ashley. She lived in New Jersey. She knew how to make websites. She knew about Facebook and social media and all this stuff. And then I met someone else that lived in New Zealand, and he knew about the SEO, search engine optimization. So I had a whole team of people all over the entire world in 2010, helping me manage the ministry and teaching me all these different skill sets that I needed to know. And as I would walk with God and continue to go in the direction that God was taking me in, people were falling away on my left and on my right. Denominational differences would cause close friends to flee from me. I'm over here holding on to the Baptist denomination, and the girl that was helping me in New Jersey, she was a Pentecostal, and the guy out in New Zealand, I didn't really know him that well, but God used all these different people to form what is now called Grow Your Faith. I had a team, or I had a guy that was helping me out early on. He lived in the same state, in the same area in North Texas, and this individual actually went onto my Facebook page one day and deleted everything. And then when I went up to him, I said, "Hey, why did you do that?" He said, "I didn't do nothing." Yeah, right. You're the only one that had access. It got deleted. I didn't delete it. You're the only one with the access. Come to find out, he was just mad that the ministry was going places. And I don't know why, because I wanted to take him with me. So there was something weird going on. I think he was trying to create his own off to the side, almost like this is my business, but I'm gonna destroy your business. This is not business. This is a ministry. We are reaching people for the name of Jesus Christ. If you treat ministry like a business, you're in the wrong ball game. Ministry is not a business. And too many people treat ministry like too many people treat ministry like it's a business. It's not a business. It's a ministry. I started off as an evangelist, but what never stuck with me was, I understand that we are saved by grace. We come to Christ, ask for forgiveness, we're forgiven, we're saved. But there was a reason why the Apostle Paul wrote the New Testament, or like 90% of the New Testament, right? There's a reason why we have the Bible. If accepting Christ into your heart was all that there was, God would have never given us the Bible. And so around my 20s, I started thinking, I think I think that we should be living what this says. I think that we should be like applying this to our life. And so I started to write sermons, and my sermons were bad. I was a bad sermon writer. My grammar is bad, my English is bad, my just everything is bad because I was never in class. I was in the cop car in the office. And so I have bad grammar because of that. But despite that, God is still using me. But when I was 20 years old, I was a manager at Walmart. I became a supervisor at Walmart. I also lost everything. So I was quite literally homeless, living in my car, and I was a manager at Walmart. And during that time period, I was just holding on to God and holding on to my faith and believing that God would redeem everything. Somehow, some way, God was going to redeem all the broken pieces in my life. Those days and months and years of being homeless, sleeping in my truck, were very hard and peaceful. Sometimes I miss waking up in the front seat of my truck and just seeing the sun rise. And then I just go down to the gas station and get me a cup of coffee and then head off to work or head off to the church because the big mega church I went to, um, it had like, it was open 24/7. So you can walk in and just like sit down, read the Bible, pray, meet with people. I kind of miss that. Being up here, the churches are not open all the time. So I miss that, and I want that back. I want to be able to go to a church every single day and just read my Bible, meet with other believers. I miss that. In the middle of all that homelessness stuff, when I was 22, I decided I'm going to go join the Marine Corps. And that's why I became a United States Marine. I was homeless. I had this job. My finances were screwed. I lost everything, man. My credit score went to 350. My credit card got maxed out. My truck was on the repo list. Like they were looking for the truck when I was 19. Like when I was 19 years old, I was wiped. I was financially wiped out. I lost everything, just like the Job in the Bible. 19 years old, 3 years after accepting Christ. And I lost everything. The woman, the money, the job, my car, my credit card, like everything gone. And I can go into all the stories, and I got all these like cool stories, right? Of how God did this and God did that, and this guy comes out of nowhere, but I'm gonna skip over it. So I joined the Marine Corps, and fast forward, someone teaches me how to make a budget when I'm 25, and I sit down and I look at my finances. I think maybe I can afford a place to live. So I go and get a extended stay hotel, and I was like 26 when I did that. Extended stay hotel and and Uber driver. So I was doing Uber, got paid every week. I paid my rent, paid all my bills, and I slowly rebuilt my finances and rebuilt my credit and rebuilt my financial life. Then we get to 28 years old. I was 28 years old. It was April the 1st of 2021. I had a dream. In the dream, I saw the whole state of Wisconsin. And honestly, when I had that dream, I had no idea what I was looking at. I knew I was looking at one of the states of the United States, but I'm from Texas. Texas is the United States of America. It's the great nation of Texas, the United States of Texas. Like Texas is America. Like Wisconsin? Nah. Like I'm not thinking about going to Wisconsin. I want me a Texas woman with Texas kids. I want a cowboy hat on my head and on my woman and on my kids and cowboy boots. But God gave me this dream of Wisconsin, and I started praying about it. And during the next couple of weeks, I would pick people up in Uber because I'm an Uber driver, and so my passengers they were just just randomly telling me, "Oh, you should go to Wisconsin and drive Uber." And I had this one guy, he pulls his phone out. He's like, "Look, I'm gonna show you. I'm gonna give you a tour of Wisconsin. Right here's the Wisconsin Dells, and this is Green Bay, and oh, over here in Madison, there's this like area that if you do Uber up and down this street, you're gonna make a killing." And he just gives me a tour of Wisconsin. And I'm just looking at him like, dude, I'm not going to Wisconsin, man. You have your mind. And then finally I gave in and I decided I think God is calling me to Wisconsin. So I sat down and I'm thinking about the cost. I'm thinking, okay, if I go to Wisconsin, I'm gonna do this for like at least a week or two, and then I gotta get back to Texas. So I'm gonna plan this out. I'm gonna leave on this day. I had a day, a month, a year. I knew exactly when I was gonna leave. I was gonna go to Green Bay or Milwaukee and do Uber and and tell some people about Jesus and just go back to Texas. And I'm done. I'm done. I did what God wanted me to do. And right after I made that um that plan, I was doing Uber the next day, and I was turning, and this truck was coming the other way, and he was in my blind spot, and he hit me head on. And the front of my car was all damaged, and I had to take my vehicle and put it in the shop. And I waited for like 2 months to get my car back. And during that time period, I got my life insurance license. I took the test, I took the classes, I took the test, got my life insurance license, and then I began to work on getting my financial license to be a financial advisor. I had the time, I'm out of a job, and I had money saved up because I learned how to manage my money. So I'm taking all these tests and everything, and I'm almost about to become a financial advisor. I took the side test, I passed. I passed the side test, and I now I have to take the Series 6, the Series 7, all these different tests to be able to buy and sell securities and to give advice to people about how to invest their money. And I'm doing all this, and then finally I got my car back from the shop, and by the time I got my car back, I'm looking at my bank account. I'm back down to zero. At the time, I had like $5,000. And so I just thought, well, you know what? If God wanted me to go to Wisconsin, then I would have never gotten into that car accident. And none of that would have ever happened. So I just said, you know what? I guess I'm not supposed to go to Wisconsin. And so I uh I just kept on pursuing the financial career, kept on taking the test. And a couple of months later, I met a woman. I met a woman that lived in Phillips, Wisconsin. And when I met her, it was through my ministry because I have a ministry for single Christians to meet each other. And it's kind of like a dating website. And so I um I meet her. We start talking. I see she's from Fairlopes, Wisconsin, and I prayed. And I said, I looked at the map, and I was thinking about the calling that God gave me about Wisconsin. I'm looking at the map, and I'm thinking, God. I literally prayed. I said, God, I'll go to Wisconsin, Green Bay or Milwaukee, but not Phillips. I don't want to go Phillips, Wisconsin. And as this girl and I, we started talking more and more and more. Christmas time came around, and I was in a debate with God. I was telling myself I'm gonna go to Oregon because I've only met my dad one time. I wanted to go to Oregon to meet my dad a second time for Christmas. So God was telling me, no, Keith, I want you to go to Wisconsin for Christmas. And I was like, I'm not going to Wisconsin for Christmas. He said, no, Keith, you need to go to Wisconsin for Christmas. For a week, I'm debating with God. I'm arguing with God. I argue with God a lot. I fight with God. I wrestle with God and I lose. I lose. A week after I was arguing with God, the girl that I was talking to that lived in Phillips, Wisconsin, asked me if I could come and for Christmas to spend Christmas with her and her family. And I was just like, I guess so. I'm not gonna say no to a woman, especially if I kind of like her. So I came for Christmas to Phillips, Wisconsin, spent time with that family, and then during that time period, I kind of saw red flags in the woman, and just kind of I kept telling myself, nobody's perfect. I'm not gonna sit here and judge someone. Nobody's perfect. I just kept saying nobody's perfect. But this individual and her family, they were judging me, gave me a nickname, called me poor city boy, told me I would not amount to anything. And and then I came back home, and when I got back home I had no more money because I was here for like almost 3 weeks. I had no more money. I had $20, and then the girl started being real judgmental to me in July, or not July, in January, because I got back. January the 2nd. I was in Dallas. I was sleeping in my car because I had $20 left, and I told her it'd be okay. I can take this 20, make 200, and turn the 200 into 20,000 with Uber. You put $20 in gas and make $200 in a day, and just keep on rotating it. And I did. I ultimately did. I made that 20 into like $10,000. But she was being real judgmental to me. She treated me so fucking bad. Right after I came back from Wisconsin to Texas, she just was switched on me. And around that time period, the door opened for me to come back to Wisconsin. And I took a job. I got offered a position at a store in Phillips, Wisconsin. And so I took the position, moved here, and I came here the first time. When I moved here the first time, the girl was like, I don't want to be with you no more. And it was right after I signed a lease with her dad on their property. They had like a cabin off to the side. I felt like I was being used or like catfished or something by this girl. Kind of like, they wanted to get a tenant or something, and they were just using me to bring in money. And so they catfished me. But at the same time, the way I felt was, I know God sent me here. So I was like really confused about everything I was going through. Like, I was in love with this girl, and I thought I was coming up here because God was going to give me a wife. And then when all my plans and expectations just crumbled, and I was angry at God. I'm telling you, man, I was almost a financial advisor in Texas. And then God's like, hey, I want you to pick everything up and go small little town, Phillips, Wisconsin. And then I come up here and my whole life just falls apart to the point that my uh my car got put on the repo list. I was still in the military at the time, so I had to go back to Texas one time a month because I was in the reserves. And so my number one priority was don't get negative discharge. Finish your contract. You've been in so long, Keith. Like, don't screw yourself now. But I fell into a deep depression during that time period. And the first time I came here in 2022, I had a gun at the time. Relationship falls apart. The job I had wasn't really working out. It was weird stuff going on with that store. Everything, nothing was working out for me. And I was just thinking, I almost became a financial advisor. I almost had the license. I walked away from everything. And so I sat down in that cabin sometime in like August, and I got that gun I had, and I sat down on one of the beds, and I just sat there and I thought, if I pull the trigger, I can make all this pain go away. I can be with God right now in heaven. If I just pull this trigger, all the pain will go away. And I thought to myself, but if I pull the trigger and I'm not supposed to die, I might have to live with a consequence of what a bullet would do when it goes through your skull. Because God is more than able to keep us alive. And I thought to myself, do I really want to live the next 30 or 40 years with some kind of damage to my skull from a bullet shot? But then I thought, well, if I do die, I'm never gonna know. I'm never gonna know why God sent me to Phillips, Wisconsin. What's going on with this Wisconsin thing? So I was wrestling with all that stuff as I was holding this gun in my hand. And so I put the gun back in my duffel bag and I text some of my Marine Corps friends. I was like, man, I just want to end my life. I just want to pull that trigger. I spent the last year in the Marine Corps on suicide watch. They wouldn't let me have a fucking gun. They're still letting me get back into the Marine Corps though. They told me, they're like, hey Keith or Wes, just go see a psych and and come back. And I told them I'll think about it. I wanted to get back. The plan was to get back into the Marine Corps, but I came back to Wisconsin and I hit a deer. And then I was gonna get me a new car and then go back into the Marines because I was still in the IRR. But it just I could never get me a vehicle because one thing, just the door wasn't opening. Matter of fact, the door opened a week after my contract ended. So right whenever I got out of the IRR, then the door opens for me to get a car. But literally like a month before my contract ended, I was in the same dealership and they're like, no, there's nothing we can do to help you get a new car. And I'm just like, I really wanted to get back into the Marine Corps. When I got out of the Marine Corps, they gave me this plaque and it just says, you know, your years of dedication have changed the lives of many and you will never be forgotten. The Marines have treated me better than God's people. The Marines have treated me better than God's people. I have been treated better by the Marines than by the church. At least up here, you know, I down in Texas, I was treated pretty good by the church down there. But the culture up here is just it's bad. Well, because I hit the deer with my car when I came, and I had a job that I got as a utility locator, I started going to church in the town of Phillips, Wisconsin. The first church I went to, I financially supported that church. I pulled money out of my pocket, threw it in the plate, and I was not even counting how much money I was just, you know, every week I was throwing $80, $100 into the plate every week. So I have no idea how much I given to that church. Within a year of being at that church, I was approached by the deacon and by someone else, and they're like, Keith, will you be part of the property committee? I was like, yeah, I told them anything you want me to do, I would do. You name it. I'll do whatever you want me to do. And then the pastor of the church said, Keith, I saw you preaching online. I'm gonna start having you preach in the church at the pulpit. I said, yeah, that's fine. If you want me to do that, you know, I'm just here to serve the body of Christ. While I was at that church, I had a dream. The dream I had is that I was standing in the middle of Phillips, Wisconsin, and there was all these young people about my age, and they were around me. And we were all lifting up our hands, worshiping God. I told the pastor of the church I was going to, I said, hey, I had this dream. Here's the dream. I think God wants me to reach young people for Christ. The pastor of the church said, let's put a pin in it and come back to it later. And I thought, well, he's the pastor. I'll let him pray about it or do whatever the whatever he needs to do to think about it or pray about it or whatever. He's the pastor of the church. I'm gonna leave it to him. I've already gone to him. It was like 6 months later and I haven't heard nothing. So I go up to him and say, "Hey, have you thought about the idea that I had?" And I was trying so hard to like get the pastor of that church to allow me to start some kind of young adults ministry in that church so that I'm able to reach young people for Christ and get young people back into the church. The pastor told me, "Oh yeah, I forgot about that. We'll talk about it next week." And he just every time I would go up to him and say, "Hey, can we talk about it now?" It'd be like, "Oh yeah, next week." Finally, he came up to me one day. He's like, "Keith, I want you to be a member of this church." I said, "Yeah, that's fine. I'll be a member of your church. Why not?" He said, "Cool. We'll talk about it next week. The next week, Pastor." So the next week came, and he texted me on my phone and said, "Hey, Keith, actually, I don't want you to be a member of the church anymore." Around that time period, members of the church started to add me on Facebook, and they found out that I'm a conservative. I have conservative views. I have a very biblical view of what the Bible teaches. I don't twist what the Bible says. This church was a liberal church. So I'm going to be honest, at the time, I didn't know the difference between a conservative Christian and a liberal Christian. I thought, everyone believes what the Bible says. I was naive, and I would admit that. So these people went to the pastor and pretty much was like, if you let him be a member of this church, we're all going to leave. And so I just said, you know what? I'll leave. I will leave so I can keep the peace and y'all don't have to worry about nothing. So I left. I went to another church and and that was the only church that they kept on reaching out to me like, no, Keith, you should come back. I was like, no, if y'all are a liberal church, I'm not liberal. Y'all can keep doing whatever it is that y'all are doing, but I need to go find a church that I can be part of. And so I went to another church, and it was the same thing. It was a liberal church, but this church, the pastor didn't even know what the church believed. So I was like, yeah, I'm not going to this church. But I did go back to that church to speak to the pastor and say, hey, you're young, I'm young. Let's get together to reach young people for Christ and get them back into the church. He said to me, I do not want to reach people for Christ. I wish I was making that up. I'm not making that up. The dude told me I do not want to reach people for Christ. And I was just like mind blown. That pastor is no longer a pastor of that church. The very next day or the day, like a couple of days later, he got sent away to some other church because how that denomination works, they send pastors from church to church every 2 years or so, which I think is a bad way of doing ministry. You want your pastor of a church to build relationships with the people so that he can pastor the church. Every shepherd builds relationships with the sheep because the sheep know the shepherd's voice. There has to be some kind of relationship going on. You can't just have this pastor here for 2 years and then switch them and send someone else, and you're not going to be able to disciple people like that. But nevertheless, he said that to me, so I went to another church. In the third church I went to, or technically the fifth church I went to, because I went to two other churches before I hit the deer on my car. But this other church I went to, the pastor would stand on stage and say that he had divine messages from God. And I found out what he was doing is going on people's Facebook page, finding stuff out about them, and then standing up on the stage at the pulpit and telling people in the audience that he has special messages from God to those people in the audience. But what he was really doing is looking at people's Facebook page, getting information, and then portraying himself into looking like he got some kind of special access to God that no one else in the room has. And that right there is called manipulation. That right there is called the spirit of Jezebel. Jesus tells one of the churches, you tolerate that woman Jezebel. And he warns that church, if you don't repent, if you don't rebuke Jezebel, I'm going to remove your lampstand from its place. And so I stayed at that church for a while. I financially supported that church because I'm not judgmental. I believe that Christians, we all have our different theology. If I hear that you're preaching the gospel in some way that, people are coming to Christ, being baptized, it's worth my money. But here's when everything went south. God started speaking to me in that church while I was in the church. And I would go up to the pastor of that church and tell him my experiences hearing from God. So, and he would just look at me with the blankest face possible and just so confused. Like the dude's face just looked so confused. And I was just like, you stand up on stage every Sunday and say you have divine messages from God. But then if I come to you and tell you that I have a divine message from God, you just give me this like confused look on your face. And it started making me wonder, does this pastor really hear from God, or is he just playing a role in front of the church to deceive them into thinking they have some kind of special access to God? In that church, there was a pastor, the founding pastor of the church was still alive. He was 95 years old. A few months before, God spoke to me and told me, Keith, you need to speak to the founding pastor of the church because he's about to die. And so I kept that to myself. And I did not want to speak to him because I'm an introvert. I'm not, it's hard for me to speak to people I don't know. I like building relationships with people. And so I kept it to myself, but ultimately the door opened and I was actually forced into a conversation with the founding pastor. And as I was talking to the founding pastor of the church, God spoke to me again and told me, Keith, he's gonna die. And God told me the month and the week that he was gonna die on. And I was thinking to myself, do I tell him that he's going to die on this month and that week? And I thought to myself, no, I'm not gonna say that. I'm gonna keep that to myself, but I don't know why God is telling me this stuff. I was so confused. And not in the evil way, because the devil can confuse you too. I was confused that why is God telling me that this individual is going to pass away? What does this individual have to do with me? And so I was just in the middle of trying to figure out why I'm in Wisconsin and why am I having these dreams and why, all these things. I had all these whys going through my mind and nobody can give me the answer. I told the pastor of the church everything from A to Z because I was told by members of the church leadership team, you should talk to the pastor of the church. You're having these dreams, you're having these experiences, you think God is telling you to do A, B, and C, and D. You should talk to the pastor. So I go to the pastor and tell the pastor everything. And the pastor gives me like a blanket answer, like, oh, well, you should just talk to one person at a time and invite them, invite them to this church. And I was thinking to myself, no, that's not what God is telling me to do. At the time, the pastor had no idea that I had a ministry online. He had no idea that I was a preacher. And so he was telling me what to do from the viewpoint of me not being a minister. He was telling me from the viewpoint of me just being a common person. This is not everything I have, but see, that's my bachelor's of divinity. And then I have all these other certificates and of letters of a pre. What is it called? Letters of something. Oh, letters of good standing. And this is just stuff that goes along with ordinations and stuff like that. But I have all these different certificates. Not that they even matter. They do matter. This is a letter of good standing. I got two of them. But but the pastor was telling me without any knowledge of who I am or what educational background I have or about my ministry online or he no idea that I who I am, right? And so he was telling me this stuff and I was keeping it to myself because I've already gone to a couple of churches and I had a feeling about, what if this church is just like the rest? So I was just keeping stuff to myself. Ultimately, the founding pastor actually gets put on hospice. I messaged the pastor, the current pastor, and I told him, God told me a few months ago that the founding pastor was going to die. You should get the funeral ready. And ever since I said that to him, the founding pastor has always just ghost me, gaslight me, ignore all my messages. I mean, it's okay for you to sit there on the at the pulpit and do your witchcraft because prophecy without discernment is witchcraft. But here I am actually hearing from God, and somehow it's like judgmental. And that's what he called me. He called me judgmental, and he called me unfruitful, which I don't understand what that even means. Because none of these preachers have taken the time to get to know me except Pastor Arneson. Pastor Arneson was the Presbyterian pastor that we actually got into an argument because he was telling me about how he believes that the Holy Spirit could be a woman. And I told him that's heresy. We got into an argument about that and some other stuff. But he was going to be willing to put me at the pulpit to preach because he got to know me. But all these other preachers in the town of Philip, they never, they never sat down with me to get to know me. I'm getting messages from people saying, "Oh, you should go to the Victory Church, Victory Christian Center, and see if they will help you plant a church or do this ministry." They are one of the first churches that I reached out to. Pastor Jason of Victory Christian Center told me that my idea to reach young people for Christ was a parachute ministry and that I should go and ask whatever church I'm going to for help to fulfill that ministry. And that's exactly what I have been doing. I went to multiple churches and it got me nowhere. And I told Pastor Jason at the Victory Christian Center, I'm making it real known because I got people from that church attacking me online. I told Pastor Jason of the Victory Christian Center, I've already gone to most of these churches. They all told me to go look for someone else to do it with. So I'm asking you. And he never reached back out to me. So for all of those people out there saying that I'm not doing anything biblical, hey, I went to all these churches. I even went and said, hey, how about this? How about we just put our differences aside? How about we put our differences aside because we all have different theologies and we can all fight with each other all day long until the moon comes back out. We can fight with each other on theology until the second coming of Jesus Christ. How about we put our differences aside and come together and reach the next generation for Christ? And you know what these preachers told me? We don't know you. We don't want to. So one day I was led by God to read the book of Nehemiah. Nehemiah was passionate about rebuilding the walls around Jerusalem. And as he got up and started rebuilding the walls around Jerusalem, there was a group of people attacking him, calling him prideful and all kinds of nasty names. And he told them, you will not have an inheritance in all of Jerusalem when these walls come up because you did not help build up the walls. You actively try to stop me from building the walls around Jerusalem. And as I was reading about that story, God spoke to me and said, Keith, you're Nehemiah. You're trying to rebuild the walls of the church in Price County. But all the clergy, all the religious leaders of Price County are actively coming against you without cause. They come up with excuses of why you're not good enough, but they are. So when this is done, they will not have a inheritance. And what that means is that God is getting ready to remove the lampstand of many of the churches and pastors of Price County. I wish I knew this in the beginning. It would have saved me a whole lot more time. But now I know and I see the condition of the church. I see the condition of the church leaders. People can say whatever they want to say about me, but there's no pastor in this town of Phillips, Wisconsin, or in the county of Price County that is funding a church with his own income. And even saying, I don't want to get paid. I'm going to go work my job as a utility locator, and I'm going to try to raise up new leaders for the church. And I'm going to raise up a church right here of people who have been rejected and become outcasts of the local church and people who just refuse to go to church. So for those people that you look at the church and you see all this corruption, I see it too. I do. I see it. And God sees it. But you are welcome to come to this church. But if you come just to start problems with me, don't come. I'm actively trying to reach people for Christ. I'm not actively trying to get into conflicts. Okay? There's people looking at me, they want to pull me into conflicts. I don't want conflicts. And remember, I'm a United States Marine. I am a United States Marine. I'm not feminine like a lot of these churches and church pastors. I'm masculine. A lot of the when World War I and World War II happened, all the men went to war, and then when they came home, they tried to go back to church, but all the churches were feminine because all the women took over the churches, and then they made all the churches feminine, and so all the men stopped going to church because there wasn't any churches for them to go to. This is a church you can go to. With that being said, God bless you. I'll see you tomorrow in another video. And here in a couple of days, I'll let everyone know where the location is for this church plant. I got what, like 14 chairs right there, 15, 16. I got like 14 chairs, you know, 15, 16. I can stand up and preach. But if you want to come, if you want to donate some chairs, bring your lawn chair. I really do think this room's going to be packed out one day. Because I think that there's a lot of hurting people who have been hurt by the church, like me and like my old boss, that a group of church leaders gathered together to destroy his marriage and behind the scenes. And that's a whole nother story. I just got done talking to a whole family. I got done talking to about 5 people. It was a whole family. The grandparents, the parents, and the kids that they stopped going to church because the church stopped being the church. And they're not alone. There's more people. There's more people who have stopped going to church because the church is no longer the church. This is the church. This right here. So in a few days, I'm going to release the address. And there's going to be a lot more than just a Sunday service. I'll be here every single day. So the door will be open and you can come in here and pray between the times of 5 p.m. and 8 p.m. And I'll be right here working on my sermon or whatever. If you want to come and talk to me in person, come and talk to me in person. If you want to meet Keith in person, you can come and meet me in person. Because this internet stuff, anyone can sit behind a screen with a smile on their face. You want to come and meet me in person and get to know who I am in real life? The door will be open between 5 p.m., 8 p.m. because I work and all day long. I'm about to start making overtime, so it's gonna be real tight. But yeah, God bless you. Have a great day.